The first snowfall of the season drifted across the New Mexico plains like powdered glass, soft and cold, but carrying the kind of chill that made a man pull his coat tight and hurry back inside. But not Elias Rowe. Snow never bothered him much anymore. When you lived enough years with loneliness, sitting at your table like an extra chair, a little cold didn't make much difference. Elias was 33, strong in the way ranchers had to be strong, quiet, steady, the kind of strength children recognized instinctively and leaned toward. His daughter, Hannah, depended on that strength. She was only 7, but had already learned how to read her father's moods, how to braid her hair alone, how to sleep through nights when he sat awake, staring at the unlit fireplace. 4 years had passed since his wife died of fever. 4 years of tending cattle, mending fences, and trying to fill 2 roles when he barely felt capable of one. He loved Hannah more fiercely than anything in the world, but fatherhood had never been meant to be a job done by one man alone. That morning, while fixing the corral gate, Elias heard Hannah's voice from inside the house, soft, humming, the same tune her mother used to sing. It nearly broke him. He turned away from the house so she wouldn't see the tears gathering in his eyes. "Lord," he prayed silently, "I'm doing my best. But my girl, she needs a soft hand. She needs a woman to teach her things I don't know how to teach. I don't ask for much, but help me raise her right." He had no idea. The answer to that quiet prayer was walking, barely standing really, across the empty plains that very moment. Ihoka felt every step like fire along the bottoms of her feet. The wind bit at her cheeks, turning them raw. She clutched a torn blanket around her shoulders, wishing she could disappear into the land, into the wind, into anything that didn't hurt so much. 3 days earlier, her small Apache settlement had burned after a violent clash with miners who wanted the land beneath their homes. Houses, animals, supplies, gone. She'd escaped the flames, but she hadn't been fast enough to save the elderly aunt who raised her, or the few belongings she'd carried all her life. Ihoka had nothing now except survival. She had no tribe to return to, no distant relatives to rely on, and the nearest town had made it painfully clear she wasn't welcome. Redwood Junction greeted her with spit on the ground, and mothers pulling their children indoors. No water, no food, no mercy. So she walked. Her legs trembled, her stomach ached, and her throat was so dry she could barely swallow. She kept walking, because the alternative was lying down and letting the coyotes finish what hunger had started. The world blurred around her. Mountains, sagebrush, snow, sky. Everything melted into shapes she could no longer separate. She didn't even recognize the ranch fence when she stumbled into it. Her knees buckled. Her hands slipped from the fence rail. She collapsed into the cold, closing her eyes, ready to surrender to the darkness edging into her vision. Elias wasn't expecting to find anyone, much less a woman, near his property. He had ridden out because Hannah left her toy horse outside again, and the wind had carried it toward the far fence. He muttered about careless play until he saw the shape crumpled near the brush. At first he thought it was an injured deer. Then he saw the blanket, the long dark braid, the frost collecting at the edges of her eyelashes. He jumped off his horse so quickly the animal snorted in surprise. "Ma'am," he called, approaching carefully. "Can you hear me?" The woman stirred weakly. He knelt beside her, noticing how cold her skin felt, how she shivered, even though she didn't seem to have the strength to move. "You're freezing," he murmured. God help me. He looked around. Coyote tracks circled nearby, close enough to make his stomach tighten. You were lucky I came by. Ahyoka tried to speak, but the words came out slurred. She tried to push away from him, fear flickering in her eyes, but her arms trembled and collapsed. Elias raised his hands gently. I ain't gonna hurt you. You need help, and I got a warm house right over that hill. Let me get you there. She blinked slowly. Then her body sagged, giving him her answer. He lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. It scared him. Hold on, he whispered. Just hold on a little longer. The warmth of the ranch house felt unreal to Ahyoka when she woke, as if she had slipped into someone else's life. Soft blankets lay over her. A fire crackled nearby, and the air smelled of stew, wood smoke, and something she hadn't tasted in days: safety. She blinked up at the ceiling. Then a small face peeked over the edge of the blanket. You're awake, the little girl exclaimed, sliding closer. Daddy said you were very tired. I watched you because he said you shouldn't be alone. Ahyoka opened her mouth. Her throat ached. This is our house, the girl said proudly. I'm Hannah. What's your name? It took a moment for Ahyoka to find her voice. Ahyoka. Hannah repeated the name, delighted by the sound. Can I call you Miss Ahyoka? Ahyoka nodded slowly. Then Elias stepped into the room, carrying a steaming cup. Careful, Hannah. Give her some space. Hannah scrambled back obediently. Elias approached the bed, studying Ahyoka with concern. You were half dead when I found you. Drink this. It'll help. She did. The warmth slid through her stomach, almost painful after so much hunger. Why? She whispered. Why help me? Elias didn't hesitate. Because no one with breath in their body deserves to be left out in the cold. And because my daughter needs to see kindness in this world. Ahyoka stared at him. She didn't trust men easily, not after everything she'd endured. But this one spoke with a calm sincerity that softened her defenses. You're Apache, ain't you? He asked gently. She nodded. Well, he said with quiet firmness, that don't change the fact that you're a human being, and that's enough reason to offer help. She swallowed, emotional pain flickering in her eyes. The town did not think so. His jaw tightened. Redwood Junction has many good people, but a few loud fools ruin the rest. You won't hear that kind of talk under my roof. Ahyoka lowered her gaze. I have nothing to give in return. You're alive, Elias replied softly. That's enough. Days passed. Ahyoka regained strength slowly. She tried to leave twice, insisting she didn't want to be a burden. But each time, the cold air made her legs weak, and Elias sent her back inside. You've nowhere to go, he said gently. Heal first, then we'll talk. She cooked simple meals in gratitude, mended old shirts, swept the floors, and taught Hannah how to braid better. The little girl followed her everywhere, as if some missing part of her heart had finally returned. Elias watched the two of them with a strange ache in his chest. Something warm, something dangerous, something hopeful. Ahyoka wasn't loud or demanding. She moved quietly, noticed things others overlooked, and spoke to the animals as if they understood her. The horses calmed around her. The chickens didn't scatter when she collected their eggs. Even the ranch dog, Dusty, a cranky old shepherd, followed her like a loyal guardian. Elias wasn't blind. He saw what was happening. His house felt different, fuller, softer, alive again. One evening, after Hannah fell asleep, he found Ihoka outside, staring at the sky. "You think about leaving," he said softly. She nodded. "I cannot stay where I am not wanted." "You are wanted," Elias said, surprising even himself with the force of it. She looked at him sharply. He took a breath. "My daughter needs a mother. Not someday. Not in theory. She needs one now. And I've been praying for someone who could bring light back into this house." Ihoka's breath caught. "Why say this to me?" "Because you're not just someone I help survive," he said. "You're someone God put in my path for a reason." Her voice trembled. "I have lost everything." Elias stepped closer, meeting her gaze. "Then maybe it's time to build something new." And standing under the cold night sky, their two broken lives quietly began to weave themselves together into something neither of them had dared to imagine. The morning sun spilled over the ranch hills, warming the frost on the grass until it glistened like small diamonds. Ihoka stood on the porch, her hands wrapped around a tin mug of tea Elias had brewed for her before going out to check the cattle. She breathed in the scent, sage, smoke, faint mint, and allowed herself, for the first time in many months, to feel more than fear or exhaustion. Peace, she realized. She had almost forgotten what it felt like. Inside, Hannah was humming again, braiding the mane of her wooden toy horse. The child's voice floated through the window, soft and warm, as if the house itself were singing. Ihoka glanced toward the sound, and her lips curved in a rare smile. The ranch wasn't hers. She knew that. But every passing sunrise made her feel as if the land itself was slowly accepting her presence, like a wild horse recognizing a gentle hand. Yet in her heart, a question whispered constantly, "How long until I must leave?" Elias returned from the fields, just as Ihoka stepped down from the porch. He swiped his forearm across his forehead, brushing off dust and cold air. "Morning," he greeted her, voice low and calm. "Morning," she replied softly. He gave her a long look, one that held gratitude and a quiet admiration he hadn't voiced yet. "Hannah eat?" "She did," Ihoka said. "I made her porridge. She likes honey more than sugar." Elias chuckled. "She gets that from her mother." Ihoka's gaze softened. "She is a good child. She listens. She learns quickly." "She needed someone like you," he admitted. Ihoka shifted uncomfortably. Compliments weren't something she received often. "I do only what I can." "What you can," Elias said gently, "has changed this whole house." Ihoka's breath caught. She pretended to adjust her shawl so he wouldn't see how deeply his words reached her. Before either could say more, Hannah ran outside, nearly tripping over her own boots. "Miss Ihoka, Daddy, Papa Joe's wagon is coming." Elias straightened with concern. "Did you see him clear?" Hannah nodded. "Dust trail, real big." Elias muttered something under his breath. "He's early this month." Ihoka looked between them. "This man, he is trouble?" Elias hesitated. "Not exactly. Joe's a good man, but he's town gossip on wheels. If he sees you here—" Ihoka understood instantly. The town that rejected her would not react kindly to hearing she was living in a white rancher's home. Fear prickled lightly under her skin. "We'll handle it," Elias said firmly, voice steady. "Come on, no need to hide." "You've done nothing wrong." Papa Joe's wagon rattled up the road, an aging mule, a cart full of supplies, and a man whose belly shook when he laughed and whose nose always looked half frozen. He tipped his hat as he approached. "Mornin', Elias. Got your flour, your kerosene, your salt?" Oh, Joe froze when he saw Ihoka beside the porch. His eyes widened, not hostile, but surprised. Elias stepped in front of her partly, not quite shielding her, but making a silent statement. "Joe," he said, voice even, "this is Ayoka. She's staying here a while." Joe blinked once, twice, looked at Ayoka, then at Elias, then glanced toward Hannah, who waved cheerfully. "Well," Joe said slowly, "everybody needs a place to go when the world's been cruel." Ayoka exhaled a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Joe nodded politely toward her. "Ma'am, you're welcome here, meaning my old self won't be making trouble." Elias's shoulders relaxed. "Appreciate it. But," Joe added, lowering his voice, "you know folks in town ain't as open-minded as me." Elias's jaw tightened. Let them talk. Ayoka felt warmth bloom in her chest at his unwavering tone. Joe changed the subject, blessedly, and for the next hour they unloaded supplies. Ayoka carried sacks inside, ignoring Joe's occasional curious glances. She kept her chin high, her movements quiet, but confident. She would not shrink herself to ease others' discomfort. When Joe finally left, Elias leaned on the fence, watching the wagon disappear down the road. "You all right?" he asked her. Ayoka nodded. "He was not unkind." "No," Elias agreed softly, "but word will spread." She lowered her eyes. The fear returned, unwanted, but familiar. "I can leave before it causes trouble." Elias turned sharply toward her. "You think I'd throw you out because townfolk whisper? If they don't like it, let them look the other way." She hadn't expected such firmness. It stunned her into silence. "You saved my home from turning hollow," Elias continued quietly. "If people talk, then let them. You deserve a place to rest. My daughter deserves you. And I reckon I need you too." Ayoka's chest tightened with emotions she didn't know how to hold. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you make this house feel alive again." That evening, while Hannah braided Ayoka's hair by the firelight, the ranch felt warmer than usual. The child whispered questions in a long string, questions she'd been saving all week. "Miss Ayoka, did your mama braid your hair like this? Can you teach me how to make the fishtail braid? Do you know stories about stars? Daddy says the Apache knows stories about everything." Ayoka smiled gently. "I can teach you many things. My mother taught me stories to carry through life." "Will you stay long enough to teach me all of them?" Hannah asked hopefully. Ayoka hesitated. Hannah's fingers slowed in her hair. "I want you to stay," the little girl whispered. "I feel safe with you." Ayoka turned, touching Hannah's cheek lovingly. "I feel safe with you too." She meant it, and it frightened her. Later, when Hannah slept, Ayoka sat alone on the porch. The moon rose high, casting silver light across the plains. She hugged her shawl around her shoulders. It wasn't the cold making her tremble. It was the ache of wanting something she feared she didn't deserve. Footsteps approached. Elias joined her on the porch, leaning on the railing. "You're thinking too hard." Ayoka didn't respond. He glanced at her. "I can see it in your eyes." She inhaled deeply. "Your daughter. She is easy to love." Elias's expression softened with something tender, almost fragile. "Yes, and she's taken to you faster than I expected." She asked if I will stay. "What did you tell her?" Ayoka swallowed. "I didn't know what to say." Elias nodded slowly, staring into the distance. Then, voice low, he said, "Ayoka, listen. You're not a burden. You're not charity. This house, my home, has been missing something for a long time. And I think maybe it was waiting for you." Her breath caught. You say too much. No, he said, stepping closer. I say exactly what needs saying. Ahoka's voice trembled. If I stay, the town will judge you. They may refuse business. They may say you have betrayed your people. Elias shrugged. Let them talk. They don't live here. They don't raise my girl. They don't see what I see. And what do you see? She whispered. Elias met her eyes, his voice barely above a breath. A woman with strength carved from hardship. A woman my daughter looks at the way a child looks at sunlight. A woman I respect more than I can say. Silence fell between them, warm, heavy, full of unsaid truths. Ayoka looked away, blinking quickly. No one has spoken to me with such kindness. Then folks you met weren't worth remembering, Elias said simply. Her heart ached, not from pain, but from the hope she had tried so hard to bury. Over the next days, the rhythm of the ranch shifted naturally around her. She helped gather eggs with Hannah. She stitched leather with Elias. She sang soft Apache lullabies at night. She began to feel, not like a visitor, but like part of something living. And Elias noticed everything. How Hannah's laughter returned. How the house smelled of warm bread again. How Ayoka moved through his world like she belonged. One evening, after supper, Elias watched her quietly from the doorway as she tucked Hannah into bed. The lamp's warm glow lit her face, gentle and strong, and his throat tightened unexpectedly. She's the answer, he thought, to every prayer I've whispered since my wife died. But he said nothing, not yet. He needed the right moment, the right words, and the certainty that her heart was no longer running from the world. That night, when Ayoka stepped out into the yard to fetch water, she looked up at the stars, bright, clear, unchanging. She whispered in Apache, "If there is a place for me in this world, show me." A soft wind brushed her cheek, warm despite the cold night. Behind her, the door creaked open. Elias stood there, lantern in hand, his face gentle but determined. "Ayoka," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something important. Not tonight maybe, but soon." She turned slowly, heart pounding. "What is it?" He hesitated only an instant. "My daughter needs a mother," he said, "and I reckon I need a partner. A woman with a heart like yours." She froze. "And maybe," he continued softly, "a woman who needs a home might find one here, with us." The wind stilled. The stars burned brighter. Ayoka's breath trembled, because for the first time in her life, someone wasn't offering pity. He was offering a place to belong. The next morning dawned warm for winter, with a gentle breeze pushing across the plains. Ayoka rose before the sun, as she always did now, her body slowly remembering what it felt like to live with a purpose instead of simply surviving. She lit the fire, boiled oats for breakfast, and tended to the small chores she had taken on with ease. Hannah slept curled beneath the quilt Ayoka had mended, her tiny hand resting under her cheek, her hair braided in the style Ayoka taught her. The sight softened something in Ayoka's chest every time. Elias stepped into the kitchen just as Ayoka set his mug on the table. "Thank you," he said, voice low with sleep. "You are welcome," she replied quietly, keeping her eyes on the pot. He watched her, really watched her, as the early light touched her face. Something protective stirred in him, something grateful, something that frightened him in its strength. And today, he would have to face the town with all those emotions sitting heavy in his chest. "I've got to ride into Redwood Junction," he said. "Pick up horse feed that Joe didn't bring." Ahoika paused, a wooden spoon in her hand. Her stomach tightened. "Townspeople will know I stay here," she said. Elias nodded once. "They already know." His calm tone surprised her. "And this doesn't trouble you?" "It troubles me," he said honestly, "but not enough to send you away." Ahoika looked down. "Trouble follows me. I do not want to bring hardship to you or Hannah." "You bring peace, not hardship," Elias said firmly. "Let the rest sort itself out." But the rest had no intention of sorting itself easily. By midday, Elias saddled his horse, preparing for the 2-hour ride to town. Hannah clung to Ayoka's skirt while Elias tightened the reins. "Can we come with you?" the little girl begged. "No, sweetheart," he said gently, brushing a curl from her face. "Too cold for long rides, and I'll be back before supper." Ayoka stood beside Hannah, her hands resting lightly on the child's shoulders. She could see the tension in Elias's jaw. He wasn't afraid for himself. Men rarely were. But he was worried for his household. For them. Before he mounted, Elias turned toward Ayoka. "You stay near the house while I'm gone. I don't want you wandering far." Her heart fluttered, not with fear, but with the warmth that came when someone cared whether she was safe. "I will stay." He hesitated, as if wanting to say more. Then he gave a small nod and rode off. Ayoka watched him disappear down the long dirt road. Only when he was gone did she feel the faint tug of unease inside her. Not fear of being alone, but fear of what his trip to town might stir. Redwood Junction bustled with its usual noise, merchants haggling, horses snorting, women carrying baskets of bread or bolts of cloth. But the moment Elias rode in, conversations dipped. Eyes followed him, not hostile, yet curious, judgmental. He knew why. Papa Joe's loose tongue. He dismounted at the mercantile store. Mrs. Winifred, the shopkeeper's wife, paused counting coins when she saw him. "Morning, Mr. Rowe," she said, polite but stiff. "Heard you've taken company." Elias tightened his jaw. "A woman needed help. I offered it." "That's noble," she said carefully, "but some people say it's questionable keeping her there." "And those people," Elias replied calmly, "are welcome to stay off my land." Mrs. Winifred swallowed, then gestured toward the feed stacked near the counter. "Your order's ready." Her gaze softened slightly. "You're a good man, Elias. Don't let rumors stain your reputation." He fixed her with a steady look. "My reputation won't matter a lick if I don't do what's right under God." Word spread faster than wildfire. By the time Elias loaded the feed sacks onto his wagon, 3 men from the saloon leaned against the porch railings watching him. One spat tobacco onto the ground. "So, it's true," he drawled. "You're harboring an Apache on your ranch." Elias kept his voice level. "I'm providing shelter to a woman who was left to freeze." "Don't matter. They're trouble. Savages." Elias stepped closer, eyes narrowed. "Watch your tongue." The man scoffed. "You got a child in that house. What are you thinking bringing an Indian woman under your roof?" The words struck Elias hard, not because he doubted his choices, but because they attacked Ayoka, who had suffered enough hatred in her life. "Say anything about my daughter again," Elias growled, "and you'll find out how quick a quiet man can lose his patience." The men backed off, raising their hands in mock surrender, though their smirks lingered. Elias mounted his horse with anger simmering under his ribs. He left town faster than he arrived. The world was changing. People held tighter to their fears than to kindness. But he would not allow fear to drive out a woman who had brought more peace to his home in 3 weeks than he had felt in 4 years. No, he would not let that happen. Back at the ranch, Ioka filled the day with quiet routines, cooking, sewing, tending to the animals. Hannah worked beside her, smiling, humming, occasionally leaning her head against Ahioka's arm as if claiming her without words. But every time a breeze stirred, Ahioka found herself glancing toward the horizon. Finally, just before the sun dipped behind the hills, she saw Elias returning. Hannah squealed and ran toward him. Ahioka walked slower, her breath caught between relief and worry. Elias dismounted, ruffling Hannah's hair as she hugged his leg, but his eyes were on Ahioka. "You're back late," she said softly. "Town kept me longer than I liked," he replied. She saw the tension around his mouth, the way he avoided looking toward the road. "They spoke of me." He exhaled sharply. "Ahioka, you don't have to pretend," she said gently, her voice steady. "I know how towns see people like me." He shook his head. "You're not the problem. Their ignorance is." Ahioka looked down. "Then I should go, before their ignorance becomes your burden." Hannah gasped. "No, Miss Ahioka, don't leave." Elias's heart twisted at the panic in his daughter's eyes. He crouched beside her. "She's not leaving, sweetheart. She's just scared folks won't accept her here." Hannah grabbed Ahioka's hand tightly. "I accept you. Daddy does too." Ahioka knelt beside the girl, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I don't want harm to come to either of you." Elias stepped close. "Ahioka, look at me." She lifted her gaze. He cupped his hat in his hands, something raw and honest settling into his expression. "My daughter needs a mother, and I want you here. Not out of gratitude, not out of obligation, but because this house feels right with you in it." Ahioka's breath trembled. "But the town—" "Let them talk," Elias said. "Let them choke on their own gossip. They don't live here. We do." The strength in his voice shook her. He continued, softer this time. "I stood up for you today. I'll stand up for you tomorrow, and every day after that, if you'll let me." Ahioka blinked, and tears slipped down her cheeks, not of fear, but of disbelief that a man could defend her without asking anything in return. "No one ever defended me before," she whispered. "You've never had someone who cared enough," he answered. Hannah wrapped her arms around Ahioka's waist. "Please stay. I want you to be my mama." Ahioka froze. Her heart cracked open, full and aching, overwhelmed by love she hadn't expected. She rested her hand on the small girl's head, then looked toward Elias. He wasn't speaking, he wasn't pushing. He simply waited, eyes steady, full of quiet hope. The wind rustled the grass. The sky deepened to pink and gold, and for the first time, Ahioka didn't hear the voice of fear whispering. She heard the voice of belonging. Slowly, she whispered, I will stay." Hannah cheered, hugging her tightly. Elias closed his eyes briefly, relief washing through him like warm rain. When he opened them, Ahioka was looking at him with a mixture of courage and vulnerability that nearly brought him to his knees. "You sure?" he asked softly. Ahioka nodded. "Yes, this home feels like it was waiting for me." Elias swallowed hard. "Then you're home now, for as long as you want." She held his gaze, steady and brave. "Maybe longer." The setting sun bathed the ranch in gold, and for the first time in many years, Elias felt the future settled gently into place, shaped not by loss, but by the promise of a new family forming under his roof. Elena had been on the ranch for months now, long enough to learn the rhythm of the land, the moods of the horses, the way the wind told stories across the fields. Long enough, too, for the walls she built around her heart to begin to tremble. But not long enough, she told herself, to trust a future she had never imagined she would deserve. She remembered the first night she had slept in the rancher's spare room. The blankets were too clean, too warm. She'd spent years on the edge of survival, cold earth, thin hides, and fear as a constant companion. As she lay in that bed, she was terrified not of danger, but of comfort. Terrified that she might break if she let herself want something so gentle. And the man who had offered her that comfort, Jacob Holt, was steady, quiet, and devastatingly patient. Every morning, she saw him wake his daughter, braid the little girl's hair with surprising tenderness, lift her onto a horse, and teach her how to ride with confidence. And every morning, Elena found herself watching a little longer than she meant to. Jacob wasn't handsome in the polished way of town men. He was handsome in a lived-in way. Sun-browned skin, slow smile, a voice that was low and warm, like a fire burning down to embers. And those eyes, full of a kind of loneliness she recognized as kin to her own. But Elena was Apache-born, homeless by circumstance, judged wherever she walked. And Jacob was a respected rancher, widower, father, white, rooted in the soil in a way she had never been rooted anywhere. It was foolish to imagine anything beyond gratitude. Yet the ranch had become something she never expected. Home. The word scared her almost as much as it comforted her. The problem she didn't expect. One evening she overheard Jacob talking to his friend Mason near the barn. She hadn't meant to listen. She was going to fetch water, and then she heard her name, spoken with the kind of raw honesty men rarely allowed themselves. "I don't want to push her," Jacob said, "but I care for her more than I should." Elena froze. Mason chuckled softly. "Is caring a crime now? For someone like her?" Jacob sighed. "She's been hurt, abandoned, judged by everyone she meets. She needs peace, not a man dragging her into his life." The words hit her harder than any blow ever had, because they weren't unkind. They were protective. He was protecting her from himself. "And my daughter," Jacob added quietly. "She's attached, more than attached. You've seen the way she follows Elena. If Elena ever decided to leave..." His voice broke, soft but unmistakable. "I don't know how she'd handle it." Elena's heart twisted painfully. To Jacob, she was a blessing, but also a danger, a risk. Not because of who she was, but because she wasn't promised to stay. She stepped away quietly, not wanting them to know she'd been there, and spent the night staring at the ceiling, wide awake. Was she someone who came and went like a storm? Was she destined always to leave before she hurt someone? Or could she choose differently? The call from her past. 3 days later, a group of travelers passed near the ranch, Apache from a neighboring band. Elena recognized one of them, Pahu, a distant cousin of her late mother. The sight of a familiar face from her people jolted something deep inside her chest. Pahu greeted her with a slow nod, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You live here now?" "For now," she answered honestly. His gaze slid over the gentle hills, the sturdy barn, the fields glowing gold under the setting sun. "It is a good place." "Quiet." "It is," she whispered. "Your mother wanted peace for you." His voice softened. "She feared you would spend your life running from the world. Elena felt her throat tighten. Sometimes it feels like that's all I do. Pahu studied her long and hard. You have the look of someone who finally stopped running. Those words, simple but piercing, left her shaken. But then he added, "We leave by morning. If you want to come back with us, you would be welcomed." For the offer stunned her. For so long she had been somewhere between two worlds, never fully welcomed in either. And now, one of those worlds, the one tied to her blood, her mother, her childhood songs and stories, was offering her a place. But the other world, this ranch, this little girl who ran to her with arms wide open, and the man whose eyes softened every time she entered a room, was offering something else. A future. That night, she couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She went outside, stood under the stars she had grown up naming, and let the cold wind wrap itself around her. She whispered to her mother, the way she used to as a girl, hoping for a sign. But the wind offered only silence. The decision had to be hers. The rancher finds her. She didn't hear Jacob approach. He moved quietly when he wanted to. "Elena," he said gently, "you're shivering." She turned. His coat was already extended toward her. She put it on, because refusing kindness from him hurt more than accepting it. "You've been distant," he said softly, studying her face. "Did something happen?" She hesitated. "My mother's people passed by." Her voice was quiet. "They offered me a place with them." Jacob froze. Not a muscle moved on his face, but she saw the pain, sharp, contained, devastating. He looked like a man who had been bracing for a blow and finally took it. "You should go with them," he said finally, voice rough but steady. "They're your family, your roots, your history." His words were noble, selfless, respectful, and they cut her. "Jacob," she began. "You don't owe us anything," he said, jaw tightening. "Not me, not my daughter. You don't have to stay out of guilt or obligation. You deserve to choose the life you want." His control broke for just a moment. "I won't hold you here by hope," he whispered. That was when Elena realized something important. Jacob was the first man she had ever known who cared enough to let her go. And that was exactly why she didn't want to leave. Her realization. When she returned to her small room, she found a drawing pinned to her door. A childish sketch in crayon. Jacob's daughter had drawn it. 3 figures holding hands. A tall man with a hat. A little girl with braids. And a woman with long hair. Her, underneath, in wobbly handwriting, were the words, "Our family." Elena sat on the floor and cried. Not because she was trapped, not because she was obligated, but because, for the first time in her life, someone wanted her without condition. She thought of her people, the warmth they offered, the familiarity, the ancestral songs and fires, and she knew they would be safe, alive, whole. But she also knew something else. She was no longer the girl who lived between worlds. She was a woman choosing her own path. And her heart had already chosen. Her decision. Morning came with soft pink light creeping over the hills. Elena walked toward the eastern fields, where Pahu and the travelers were preparing their horses. He saw her approach and read her decision before she spoke. "You're staying," he said. Elena nodded. Pahu placed a hand over his heart. "Then may your new life treat you with honor, and may you teach them who you are, not who the world says you should be." She swallowed hard. "Tell them I'm well." He smiled. "I will." As they rode away, Elena felt no regret. only certainty. The moment she chose the rancher back, Jacob was in the barn when she returned. He didn't look up at first. Maybe he couldn't. "Jacob," she said. At the sound of her voice, he finally turned. When he saw she was alone, not leaving, not packed, not preparing to disappear, something in his expression cracked open. "You stayed." "I chose to," she whispered. His breath left him in a shudder. "Elena, why?" She stepped closer, closer until she stood directly in front of him. "Because your daughter chose me. Because you gave me safety. Because this ranch gave me peace. Because no one has ever cared enough to give me the choice." Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. "And because," she lifted her gaze to his, "I care for you too." Jacob closed his eyes as if memorizing the moment. When he opened them again, there was no hesitation left. "Elena," he said, voice thick with emotion, "you choosing us, that's more than I ever dared to hope for." For the first time, she reached for his hand, not out of need, not out of gratitude, but out of want. And when his fingers closed around hers, strong and steady, she knew this was not a temporary shelter. This was the beginning of a life. The morning after her choice, the ranch felt different, quieter, warmer, almost as if the land itself exhaled with her. Elena walked through the early light, the air cool and full of the scent of sage. The horses shifted in their stalls, snorting sleepily, and the sun glowed orange on the horizon. It was a morning like any other, yet everything inside her had changed. She wasn't a guest anymore. She wasn't a burden. She wasn't passing through. She had chosen this place and the people in it. Still, choosing to stay did not magically erase the questions, the fears, or the weight of her past. Elena had known loss her entire life. To trust in a future, that was harder. Jacob seemed to understand. When she came into the barn, he didn't greet her with questions or expectations. He simply handed her a warm cup of coffee and said, "Morning, Elena," in that steady voice that always made her feel anchored. But there was something in his eyes, a quiet, cautious hope he didn't dare speak out loud. She felt it too, a closeness, a pull, something they had both tiptoed around for weeks. They worked quietly, side by side, feeding the horses, checking the fences, fixing a loose gate. Jacob moved with a careful energy, as if he feared one wrong word might undo everything. Elena, meanwhile, felt his presence like gravity. It wasn't until his daughter ran into the barn, braids bouncing, that the spell broke. "Papa! Elena!" she squealed. "You stayed!" She wrapped her little arms around Elena's waist and held on as if afraid Elena would float away. Elena's throat tightened. "I stayed," she whispered, smoothing the girl's hair. "Good," the child said confidently, "because Papa gets lonely without you." Jacob nearly dropped the rope he was tying. "Sweetheart," he began, but his daughter was already running outside again, chasing a stray chicken. Elena hid a smile. Jacob finally exhaled. "I swear she has no filter." "She speaks truth," Elena replied softly. His eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them. Warm, powerful, frightening. She looked away first. The fear of breaking what was growing. That afternoon, Elena went to her favorite place on the ranch, the small ridge overlooking the valley. From there, she could see the river cutting through the land like a silver thread, the horses grazing, the barn standing steady and strong. She felt Jacob's presence before she heard him. He approached quietly, putting space between them, but not too much. Just enough to show respect, just enough to show he wanted to be near her. "Elena," he said gently, "you don't have to explain why you stayed. Not to me." She turned toward him. "And if I want to?" His breath caught. "I'm listening," he said. She studied his face, the careful patience, the restrained hope. It struck her deeply. Many men wanted to claim. Few wanted to understand. Even fewer were willing to wait. "I stayed because," she began slowly, "for the first time in a long time, I am not afraid of tomorrow." Jacob's jaw tightened. His throat moved, as if her words hit him hard. "And because your daughter makes me feel like I belong," she continued, voice soft but steady. "And because you make me feel seen." She paused. "But I am afraid of rushing into something I cannot take back." Jacob nodded, not in disappointment, but in recognition. "Elena, I don't need a promise from you today," he said. "You've given us more by staying than I ever expected." His voice thickened. "I won't push you. I won't hurry you. I won't ask more than you're ready to give." She took a step closer. "You already asked something," she whispered, without words. His breath was warm in the cool air. "What do I ask?" "That I trust you." Jacob swallowed. "You can." She bit her lip. "Trust is slow for me. Like healing, like thawing ice." He nodded again. "Then we take it slow." For a moment they stood in silence, wind tugging at their clothes, the world soft around them. Then Jacob spoke again, voice low. "Elena, choosing to stay is more powerful than any promise you could give." The words were simple, strong, and they struck her like truth. A night of confession. As dusk settled, turning the world blue and silver, they worked together to bring the horses into the barn. The lantern light made Jacob look softer, his features touched by gold. When he offered her a blanket to ward off the night chill, their fingers brushed, just barely, but enough to send a spark up her arm. She pulled her hand back slowly. "Jacob," she murmured, "I need to tell you something." He stiffened. "Is something wrong?" "No." She looked into his eyes. "But I need you to understand me." He listened quietly. "I have been left behind many times," she said. "By people who should have stayed. By people who promised things they never meant. I learned to expect abandonment before it could hurt me." Jacob's expression softened with pain. "Elena, so now," she continued, voice wavering, "when something feels good, or safe, or hopeful, I feel afraid. I want it, but I fear losing it. I fear building a life only to watch it fall apart." Her voice cracked. "I fear letting my heart rest." Jacob stepped closer, slowly, gently, like approaching a frightened mare. "You don't need to rest all at once," he said quietly. "Just lean, just a little, when you're ready." She blinked hard. "And what if I fail? What if I can't be what you and your daughter need?" He shook his head firmly. "Elena, I don't need perfection. I don't need certainty. I don't need a wife today or tomorrow. I just need you to be here, with us. With me. That's enough." She searched his face, trying to find any trace of dishonesty. There was none. "I don't want to hurt your daughter," she whispered. "You won't," he said. "She loves you because she knows you won't lie to her." Elena felt a tear slip down her cheek. Jacob didn't reach to wipe it, not because he didn't want to, but because he respected her space. She took a small breath and stepped toward him, closing the distance herself. "Jacob," she said softly, "I'm not ready for rings, or vows, or promises carved in stone. Her voice steadied. "But I am ready for something else." He looked at her with quiet intensity. "What's that?" She lifted her hand and placed it over his heart. "To try," she whispered. "To choose you. Not forever, not yet. But today, and tomorrow, and as many days as I can." Jacob's eyes closed for a long, trembling moment. When he opened them, they shone with something deep, strong, and reverent. "Elena," he said in a rough whisper, "that's more than I ever hoped for." She felt his heart beating under her palm, steady, strong, patient, and for the first time in years, she let herself lean, not fully, not recklessly, but enough. Enough to show him she wasn't afraid of him. Enough to show herself she wasn't afraid of being loved. He lifted his hand, slowly, and covered hers with his own. No kiss, no ring, no vows. Just hands, just warmth, just choice. A promise made without words. Quiet, real, unbroken. The final moment. As night wrapped around the ranch, they walked back to the house, side by side. Not touching, but closer than before. His daughter ran out to greet them, grabbing Elena's hand without hesitation. "Are you staying for supper?" the girl asked brightly. Elena squeezed her small hand. "I'm staying," she said, with new strength in her voice. "For supper, for morning, for a while." Jacob's eyes softened as he heard her words, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The three of them walked inside together. No one labeled it. No one forced it. No one rushed it. But it was family. Not by law, not by vow, but by choice. A beginning strong enough to grow. A bond deep enough to trust. A future they would build slowly, gently, hand in hand. And for Elena, that was more powerful than any ring.